What's up guys, hope you're well. Today we head over to Agrabah, venture into the Cave of Wonders, dethrone Jafar, and free Genie in Aladdin on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. We've looked at a couple Disney games on the channel before, with Lion King and Toy Story, with both of these ports being overall the same game with minor but notable differences in their aesthetics and gameplay. But with Aladdin, the two games were entirely different. The 1992 Disney classic came to the Super Nintendo by way of being published and developed by Capcom, coming out in November of '93. And you know what? The Sega Genesis Aladdin also came out in November of '93 by Virgin Games, the same group that later went on to make Lion King. Super interesting to find out that Tommy Tallarico produced its music, the same guy that later went on to do Earthworm Jim's soundtrack. How cool is that? They're both well-made games overall, with nice audio-visual, solid variety of gameplay, and have their fair share of fans, but they truly couldn't be more different. While the Super Nintendo entry sold well enough, isn't it crazy to know that Aladdin on the Sega Genesis was a top 3 sold game in its entire library? That's just always blown my mind. Of all the toted first-party titles on the Genesis, the Disney's Aladdin is truly a sales titan above all of them, aside from only the iconic Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2. With over 4 million in sales and at the rate siblings and kids in the 90s played together, we can easily assume that this game was a part of upwards of 8 to 10 million childhoods. Not to mention all of the rental store action too, well more than double the outreach of the Super Nintendo game. Growing up, we were a Super Nintendo household, and Aladdin was actually in my first 10 games or so that we had. While many of our childhood games have stayed pretty fresh in my mind since I've gone back to them, Aladdin is the title that I honestly haven't played in a solid 20 years. So let's jump into and check out the Super Nintendo version first, before moving on to the more well-renowned version on the Sega Genesis. Seeing and hearing this game after it's been so long is some of the more vivid nostalgia that I've experienced in a while. From what I remember, it's a fun, pretty easy game, with nice graphics and a cool soundtrack. Reviews from the time align with those sentiments well too. Just as we'd expect, things start off in Agrabah, and the first stage music is excellent. You can definitely hear and feel the similarities between the source material and the game. Agrabah looks awesome, with layered, detailed backgrounds that show great use of texture with its rough patches and cracked brick. It's a great environment, and you'll soon see what its constant strength is in each section as we move along. As far as how the game is played, it's a platformer with stages that are broken up into a few sections each. Aladdin controls pretty well. Holding Y allows you to dash just like you'd see in Mario or Donkey Kong Country. You can pick up apples to throw up and stun guards for an easy follow-up bop, or take out smaller enemies with them. The rug item is everything in this game though. It's often easy to snag in the beginning of a level if you ever lose it after a death, and it allows you to glide through the air. In fact, if you're pretty comfortable with platformers, the rug, when abused, makes this game incredibly easy. In speedruns, it's also heavily used in a funny spamming way, since you actually move slightly faster than if you just held it out. To me, the rug feels like Capcom's answer to any young or inexperienced player that could use it to make the game infinitely more approachable. But in the wrong hands, you'll be using it to simply plow through this game, hardly stopping to look around, since you can simply lean on your glide through most of anything. And what's also absurdly forgiving about this tactic is that even after colliding with an enemy in the air, say near a ledge, you can immediately whip out the rug again and just keep trudging forward. It's not to say that I never died or anything while playing, since mistakes can happen, but that's mostly due to your hearts not refilling between levels. In the beginning, you only start out with 3 hearts, meaning just 3 hits until your death, but as you move along in your adventure, you'll have a few chances to add to that. The game has a few bosses, one being the angry merchant in the marketplace, just like in the movie, except instead of using your words to get yourself out of the bind, you have to get so close that he swings and misses and give him a bop 4 times. Between the stages, you're given cutscenes with some soothing music, dialogue, and visuals framed by the magic carpet. You're also frequently given passwords, which makes the game even more considerably forgiving. And although I certainly never needed it, I definitely had to type one in just for the nostalgia's sake. Speaking of the magic carpet though, let's talk about the Cave of Wonders. This is one of my childhood favorite places to be. With its cool blue caverns, dangerous drops, extended backgrounds, glowing and mountainous treasure room, the flowing transparent water. I always loved hanging out here for its beautiful visuals along with its gorgeous melodies. After finding the magic carpet in the treasure room, you're on the last section out of this place. Before too long, after some platforming on logs and grabbing onto those necessary ropes, you pass by an iconic piece of the forbidden treasure. Shortly after, you make your way past falling boulders, whether that's by jumping over them or vaulting with Aladdin's elite athleticism. You make it to the lamp, and if you've seen the movie, you know what that means. Your little friend Abu cannot resist his greed and touches the forbidden treasure. Now that the Cave of Wonders is melting and imploding all around us, we have an auto-scrolling section that doesn't move too fast, and it's not really all that horrendous, especially with the rug. But one thing we definitely have to do is admire its atmosphere. Foreground and background look incredible, and the music is amazing. I love that it's not just a sheet of lava behind you, but multiple fluid lava streams with its bubbling magma and chunks of rock. You feel the danger and direness of the moment, and it's really great and well put together. They're even courteous with a mid-level checkpoint just in case you bite it right before the exit sign. The next section, though, is the one moment when this game's challenge actually reveals itself. Here we are on our newly acquired magic carpet, trying desperately to make our escape. They capture this moment perfectly with its scrolling multiple layers of its glowing, cavernous magma spewing backgrounds, with a dangerous rocky terrain and roaring massive hungry waves of lava. As a kid, this was a moment I just couldn't get past for a long time, and would actually play up until this point just to then reset and password to get beyond it, because to be honest, the difficulty is pretty downhill from this point onward. The reason it's so tough is simply because it only takes one hit from anything to send you back. Control is fine enough, but you do move with some weight and delay, plus things can really get quite tight out here. For footage sake, I'm glad I died at least one time, because it better shows what you're dealing with, but overall, if you can hang in there, the section is only 30 seconds long from start to finish. If you're familiar with the movie, you remember now that we go into Genie's lamp, and man, the Super Nintendo version took full advantage of making this a really beautiful and fun place to be. It genuinely feels like a bonus world, but it actually spans for 3 beautiful and fun challenges, each with really novel ideas. The audio-visual shines so brightly as we see the different backgrounds, new crisp sounds, and the level designs are just really good. Between the color schemes, the twinkling lights in the background, and its great use of layering in all of the stages, they're honestly 3 of the prettiest 16-bit levels out there. After all of that excitement, next we've got some cool themed levels that don't necessarily fit in with the flow of the movie. They took some creative liberties to give us some more beautiful and surprising levels. I'd say the trade is worth it. The graphics with the pouring sand is really cool. I should mention that it's not totally absurd to accidentally fall between these pillars that you can't grab onto. Even the game over screen is well done, where Genie's facial expression changes based on which option you're closer to, and reacts to your choice. These little touches are totally worth it to me. It shows care and some real thoroughness. Speaking of continuing, might as well mention between a lot of the stages you will enter a bonus wheel spin, and the red stars are actually continues from a game over. So before you know it, you will have so many credits that there's no way you can't finish this game. Despite having some more threats and different sets of challenges, the levels really aren't that tough at all to just glide and push through as fast as you can without too much of an issue. But the levels play really well for those that might take their time. Like I mentioned earlier, the rug just makes your life extremely easy in this game. There are, however, some moments where they consciously put obstacles that you have to approach for real due to the higher ground, but it's not all that often. I'd like to again compliment the attention to detail throughout the levels, and it really has a well-made, suiting musical theme as well. The end of the level makes you think that you might have a boss fight, but really, it's just a silly moment with Abu. Pretty random. What comes next is honestly just a great reward of a level for the player, where you get to enjoy how Capcom beautifully adapted a whole new world as you soar through the sky on the magic carpet with Princess Jasmine. And what sounds odd at first, but what I can really appreciate about this section, is that there are no threats. You cannot die. It's just 1 minute long, serves as somewhat of a bonus stage, and everything about it just makes it a really pleasant place to be. It's a great example of knowing your target audience and really respecting your source material. We're getting toward the end of the game now with just a few levels left and a final battle, with probably one of the sickest orchestral SNES tracks out there. The challenges in the first section aren't really that horrible. Again, just trying to glide forward with 6 hearts and being only a bit careful will get you through a lot. By the second section, they even added a sick lightning and thunder effect, which goes great with the powerful melodies. And the level itself is pretty neat, with some different little things to do that haven't happened on any levels before it. Aladdin simply continues to bring variety to its gameplay and audiovisual, while no level is ever really that long, and its bold, beautiful music tracks make it a joy to push through. They really did a great job making no two levels that much alike, that's for sure. It's cool to continually see these different ideas being implemented all the time. As you make those final fire climbing runs and jumps, the game is really doing everything to end on a high note. And I'll let you know that they used every opportunity to do the same with Jafar as the final boss. I mean, just look at it. In only a matter of seconds, you're given all kinds of things to listen to, look at, and it's just freaking awesome. They clearly tried to make this really cool, and they absolutely did. And you know what? Just as you'd expect from the movie, you know this isn't Jafar's final form. And don't you love the fact how much changes between every screen and song we've heard every step of the way? They just never stop. The only kind of negative thing to say about this final fight is how much slowdown there is. But hey, I suppose there really is a lot of movement between the fire, your character, the 2 bouncing eggs, Jafar as your floor and enemy. I guess it's understandable. It's definitely not very hard at all, but it is really exciting and fun to look at. They tie things up nicely with their cutscene style that has multiple cool pictures with different music tracks and sound effects. They really did try to get the most out of this format that they went with. Once Jafar has wished to become an all-powerful genie, we know that's the end of him. They even wrap things up nicely on the balcony of the palace, similarly to the last scenes in the movie. And you know what? They even gave us a different, more involved version and replaying of A Whole New World with Aladdin and Jasmine riding off into the night. And the final credits. Really, Capcom's Aladdin is a 16-bit audiovisual masterpiece. It's polished beyond belief. The gameplay has solid variety, although it's really quite easy. You could always just simply not spam the rug to play it more thoughtfully, but as it is, it's very approachable for anybody, and with everything it has to show us, honestly, that's a beautiful thing. Let's see how the Sega Genesis compares. Right off the bat, you're reminded of that unique Genesis style that you simply don't find much place else. Plus, I know we were just enjoying A Whole New World on Super Nintendo, but the Genesis wants to make it clear right away and say, hey, I can do that too. They really don't waste any time showing their polish as well, with a great opening and a frequently used flash cutscene, with the scarab being placed together. Pretty dang awesome. They do a nice job including cutscenes with some music. They're more simple than the Super Nintendos, but they work just fine. The biggest thing we can address immediately is that although these two games are based on the same movie in a gameplay and audiovisual comparative sense, as I said before, they really couldn't be any more different. So first thing you'll notice is it definitely has its own unique style. They actually had Disney involvement, unlike the Super Nintendo version, so they were able to have everything drawn for them, which they then converted into sprites. Aladdin has a great animated look to him in a similar vein to the later released Earthworm Jim, and the backgrounds naturally won't typically have as much rich color variety, but its attention to detail is absolutely stellar, with plenty of details and dimensions to the walls, even shade to seamlessly blend the foreground with the buildings. The gameplay is also completely different, where you can swing your sword or throw an apple, never bopping any of your enemies on the head. The encounters with enemies in this game is just vastly different. Instead of quickly passing by, you now need to respect the space and pay attention, and they made these sword clashing moments really interesting with decent sound effects and flashes of white light to bring it to life. You definitely want to attack early and often in this game, since your sword actually protects you from taking hits, whether that's by weapon or projectile. Ducking gives you a bit of a reach advantage, you can't be afraid to use that when you need to. I'd say throwing apples is like the one thing that these two games actually have in common, but even those work a bit differently, actually dealing damage to the enemies. As I'm flying around on a rope, climbing up and down with plenty of jumping and stretches going from left to right, as opposed to simply running to the right the entire time, you can really see the games play nothing at all alike. Virgin Games actually was pretty creative with their level design, and they also were in Lion King as well, with levels never simply going from left to right, and it can be a bit overwhelming at first, but once you know what you're looking for and feel like you can direct yourself a bit, you will definitely end up at the end of the level. It's really pretty ridiculous, but I just love how goofy and fun they weren't afraid to get with the material that they had. The game definitely has its own style, even your life bar has its own confusing way about it, with you trying not to run out of this magic lamp smoke or whatever it is. The progression is also different. Instead of having 3 left to right sections with similar themes and the same song, it's more like each level is substantially more complex and more challenging that lasts a few minutes before moving on. In the second level, you're out here in the desert trying to find the pieces of the golden scarab beetle, since you need that to find the Cave of Wonders. There are some funny touches out here to show that the developers weren't taking themselves too seriously, like how about the dinosaur fossils, the clothesline, complete with Mickey Mouse cap, the tents that look like public restrooms, with one for a genie. And what's this stop sign doing out here? Also, how about this snake enemy? You know he's not from Aladdin, but you know who he actually looks a whole lot like is Sir Hiss from Robin Hood. They even put an oasis out here. Lots of clever tongue-in-cheek aspects to go along with an overall solid level, nothing too out of the ordinary gameplay-wise. Some nice up and down, overlapping left and right paths that ultimately move you further along towards the pieces of the scarab. Even toward the end of the level, they give you another laugh, seeing Abu bouncing on one of Sultan's guards. I suppose I should mention the bonus minigame in between that you use your genie credits for. This can actually be pretty dang important as you try to make it through this game, because Aladdin on the Genesis is hard. And aside from how quickly damage can continue to be racked up on you throughout the long levels, you have true game overs with no password feature, and believe me, when it comes to its difficulty, you haven't seen anything yet. For the third level, we actually have our only graphical repeat in any part of the game, but the music is nice since we haven't heard the Street Rat song yet. Some things may take you a minute to even recognize or appreciate, like the fact that your own apples can get sliced in half by the sword juggling enemies, and with the game's consistent fluidity, Aladdin on the Genesis feels very alive and inspired. You encounter your first mini-boss on this level. Took me a moment to realize who he is. Qasim, Jafar's vertically challenged henchman, is really simple if you just stand in place and swing your sword. You're soon brought to the level's real boss, Razul, the leader of the palace guards. With the rolling barrels coming your way, you'll probably immediately think of Donkey Kong. The fight really is simple. You just have to jump over a barrel while throwing an apple in the air a handful of times. The fourth level takes place in the Sultan's dungeon, and this is when stuff gets quite a bit more challenging, with bats that seem basically identical to the ones later used in Lion King. There's a whole lot of platforming with blocks that pop in and out of the wall. You have to keep an eye out for the timing of some basic traps too. While you're waiting on those, you might even be reminded that Aladdin has some cool idle animation if you leave him for a bit. You do encounter some more of the same guards, but the most bizarre enemies are these skeletons with bombs. My game actually froze on my first attempt as one of them went off. Just 18 minutes in, but still pretty darn annoying. Anyway, when these guys blow up, you definitely need to be swinging your sword to protect yourself from the bones. There's just a lot of stuff that can chip away at your health in this level. Definitely want to do your best between the checkpoints because this is only the beginning of Aladdin starting to show its teeth. After a few minutes, you have one last gigantic climb of these blocks that pop in and out, and this isn't the last that we will see of the more demanding platforming. 5th level is another pretty challenging one, with plenty of these bats, spikes, or falling rocks to chip away at your health. You also have to make it through some dangerous spots where you're jumping over certain death, since apparently Aladdin can't swim. As you move along, you need to slash hit several of those iconic golden monkeys with that red gem that Abu can't resist. The level basically uses those as a switch to trigger some shifts of walls or platforms to keep moving along. In addition to the bats, you also have these statues that throw stones at you if you look away, but are invulnerable if you're looking at them when you attack. If you jump into their space and start attacking, chances are you'll be able to take them out pretty quickly, but they're pretty annoying. Basically every level after the dungeon can be pretty tricky and just requires you to pay a lot more attention. The mini-boss here is quite absurdly easy though, where you just need to step back and forth to swing your sword and you'll simply never get hit doing this. Another thing to mention, between the levels, if you pick up an Abu face, you get to do his bonus stage, which are really neat and can be helpful, but they don't really make it very forgiving or easy. It definitely takes a little bit of practice and foresight to make it more than a few seconds, since you're not sure what to expect, and they end immediately with one hit. 6th level is another tough one that has a handful of immediate death moments. Between landing in the lava, getting caught by one of the several gigantic boulders, or falling in a pit they really don't give you very much notice of with their screen positioning, it can be pretty tough, and that's actually where things get pretty cheap. They aren't generous with checkpoints either, so this is really a point where many players can burn a ton of lives on, if not end their run entirely. But if you pay really close attention and stay sharp with all the necessary jumps, that's the only way to get out of this place. At least at some point they do allow you to grab a life, even 2, so it can even be a bit of a stalemate as you get the timing of everything down. I meant to compliment this earlier too, the death screen has its own personality. That's a really nice touch, and I know I keep drawing the comparison, but you can actually tell that the later released Lion King and Earthworm Jim use the same idea to both do something very similar, which is really interesting. To know it all started right here. As far as atmosphere goes, the overall colors and glow with the tense music is really great, but the level is a pretty big pain to get through. You'll be repeating the same couple of surprisingly long and challenging sections more often than you'd like, but hey, you know what? I also feel that the difficulty adds to the weight of the situation. I'd say that's a good thing. It shouldn't come in the form though of running basically an inch or two from the edge of the screen. Once you can finally get through the challenge, you make a leap of faith over the lava and are snagged at the last second by your magic carpet, just like in the movie. You know what level comes next though? Now we've got the magic carpet level on Genesis. It was pretty challenging on Super Nintendo, so let's see what we all have here. It's actually kind of strange to look at for me. It's so zoomed in that you can't see anything in front of you, plus you can't even move from left to right, only up and down. So it plays way differently. Ultimately you need to react to the genie fingers pointing where to go, and to be honest, aside from just a couple of tricky moments like the time you have both hands on the screen that leads into just one of them pointing up immediately is a bit of a trap. Plus, they even thought it was a good idea, I guess, to put a question mark on here for one of them. That's just a terrible call, and that is what we can say with certainty is another example of some unnecessary cheapness. It gets pretty quick toward the end, plus there are no checkpoints, so it can be pretty annoying for sure if you aren't feeling sharp and fast with your reaction time. In the 7th level with Genie's Lamp is when things honestly get even more ridiculous. I want to compliment the overall aesthetic, nice music, the background is nothing at all like the Super Nintendo's, and if you look closely you can actually see Genesis consoles and TVs back there, which is some more tongue-in-cheek behavior from the development team. It's kind of a strange level where the blue trails kind of behave like quicksand where you're falling through them, so you have to keep jumping and keep your wits about you, otherwise you'll fall right through to the bottomless pit. There are fun aspects to the level and some extra touches that bring it to life a little bit, but what I find most frustrating and honestly inappropriate with it is how cheap and hard it is. This is supposed to be a fun time. We found the genie and we're partying with him, which shouldn't be the worst thing yet. I'm not even joking, there are so many bottomless pits waiting for you underneath all of these moving hands, and some of the design is purposely troll-like, such as the bizarre timing with the hands that drop you to your doom, but also with one hand specifically that is so tiny to fool you into thinking it's in the background and you couldn't jump to it. Plus, getting flicked between the fingers isn't foolproof at all. Like, you think that you shouldn't touch anything and let them do the work, then your character won't make it. Then if you touch too much, you may go over your target. And speaking of missing your target, the amount of times I missed on this very last obstacle was just absurd. After losing almost 10 lives here, it really blew me away when I finally made it, just to realize it's literally the last thing to do in the stage. Man, talk about so close, yet so far. I wish the stage was just more fun and forgiving, not nearly as cheap or picky, because it doesn't make the game better at all, I assure you. Now that I got the run's first game over, it's a good time to mention that you have some continues in the form of a wish, where it asks if you wish to continue, and these continues can actually be purchased in a couple of lesser obvious spots in previous levels, so that's why you want to collect those red gems, since they act as currency to buy more continues and lives. You'll also notice that the yes and no are even backwards compared to the other game, which seriously almost resulted in me ending the run early on accident. After all of that, we are finally in the palace, and although there's consistent platforming, it's really not that bad at all, and kind of a relief honestly to see something so straightforward. The game starts to use the magic carpet as an interesting tool to bounce you around between some level sections, where you may pick up some items, but always need to be swinging your sword to deal with the multiple Iagos or deflecting projectiles. Overall, you have some tough squeezes from jumping rope to rope, you encounter multiple guard enemies, and have multiple magic carpet sections. The level isn't too bad to get through though. By the end of it, you come across Abu, and if you can't already tell, I haven't played through this game before, so when I got here I definitely tried swinging my sword and jumping around underneath the cage to see if anything would happen, and nothing did. So eventually I moved on to the end, where the carpet is laying, unresponsive, and after messing around with both things for a bit, I just didn't know what to do. And wouldn't you know it, I was just barely off with the positioning of my jumps, because if you're right underneath Abu, that's what needs to happen in order for him to get busted out. I think that's kind of a bad decision to even allow a player to get so far and even leave it up to chance that they'd get stuck and confused in this way. Simply allow Aladdin to break the cage in more ways. There's literally no good reason to make it as unusual and picky as they did. Eventually, we reach the end of the level and have to fight Iago as he turns the wheels. It may take you a moment to realize how to get up to his level, but when you're there, you just throw apples, and that's really all there is to this fight. We are finally at the end of the game, in Jafar's lair, full of spikes, swinging balls, guards, the statues, several Iagos. Everything has come out to stop you at this point. The music from the lava stages are back, and it matches the setting perfectly. We have fought hard to get here, let's do this. Oh, okay, you know, the spiky floor that looks the same as all of the other spiky floors throughout the level don't hurt you, they act like bottomless pits. The cheapness, man. I'm telling you, for all of the style and neat stuff that Aladdin on the Genesis has going on, it has almost as much cheapness to match as you go along. Speaking of cheapness, let's talk about Jafar. The first form, albeit really strange, is pretty easy because his magic just pulls you toward him and he doesn't even do damage to you unless you're not swinging your sword. But you can't hurt him with the sword either, which may surprise you at least a little bit. So just like that, apples have all of a sudden become the most important aspect in the effort to finish this game. And you know what I don't have enough of? Apples. The second form of Jafar with the snake, it busts out without warning, and you also have fire that immediately gets you if you stand on the platforms. So strange and unnecessary. It's moments like this that feel so much less like efforts to make the game good, but only to make it hard, with real, no warning intentions to hold players back and demand more of their time. So like I said, I got to this part of the game without enough apples because I died too many times. I got a game over. And a huge problem with that is that although the game puts 4 apples on the screen for you if you run out, it's on top of a platform that you cannot stand on without immediately taking flame damage. There seems to seriously be no way around it, and you know what that means? We have to start this game over. Through all of the trouble, which was a lot, plus with all the time it took me on this fight to realize I didn't have a chance, it took me an hour and a half, and I just realized I need more apples to make this fight possible. Well, I only have the weekend to work on this stuff these days, can't waste any time, better get right into it. Time to practice these freshly learned skills.